Rondout Waterfront. I have just a few announcements that we're going to run through here first. First, a reminder, this meeting's being recorded, so that we will be recording it and posting it to the website after the meeting. So if you know anyone who was not able to join us tonight and might be interested in hearing about this topic, please let them know. They can go to engagekingston.com to watch the recording after the meeting. Also, tonight during the meeting, if you have any questions for us, please feel free to reach out with the Q&A, and we'll do our best to respond in live time. And any questions we don't get to during the meeting, we'll follow up with you afterwards. So please use that. We'll also be doing some phone polling, so have your phone available nearby, and if you'd like to participate in that with text messaging. To get us started here, I'm going to turn it over to Bartek to walk through the agenda.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining tonight. I know it's a busy news day, but thank you for joining. My name is Bartek Stardai. I'm the Director of Housing Initiatives for the City of Kingston, and also stewarding this project from the city side. We'll start tonight's presentation by going over what form-based codes are and the community input that has been received so far. That process started in November. And then we'll turn to the waterfront area and we'll go through a few scenarios. We'll finish tonight by getting your feedback on these scenarios and what the potential zoning could look like in the waterfront. And we'll be doing that via your phone. So please have that ready. Amy, thank you.
Great, thank you. So I mentioned I'm Amy Groves with Dover Cole & Partners, project manager for Kingston Forward, but I'm really representing a much larger team. Here with me tonight, you'll hear from Victor Dover and Eric Pate and Elise Dallas. And also on our team, not with us tonight, but with future meetings, you'll get a chance to meet the LaBerge group, who is leading up the environmental impact analysis work that is being done in coordination with the zoning. We have the Land Use Law Center, who is working on code integration and answering any, making sure that the code is meeting New York State legal requirements. We have Hall Planning and Engineering, who is working on street design. And finally, Gridix will be working on creating an interactive code platform so that when we have a new code, it'll be easy to access and review and use. So I mentioned the quick polling. So we're going to do a quick test question to make sure that's working. And so I'm going to ask everyone who wants to participate to get out their phones, and you can send a text message to 22333. And the message that you need to send is Dover Cole 516. I know that's kind of a lot of information, so I'll hold it here just a minute so you can get your phone out and get that information plugged in. So again, you send the message and the 2 to the number 22333. And you send the message Dover Cole 516. It could be capital, it could be lowercase, either one works. And hopefully if that works, you'll get a message that looks like this, confirmation saying that you've joined our session. And then you only need to do that once, and you can leave it open for the meeting, and then we'll have that, you'll be able to answer questions. You don't have to keep putting that in. So that's just once you have it in, you're able to do that. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to have Elise bring up her screen, and we'll ask our first question to see if it's working.
Okay, so like Amy said, you'll just type in your answer. So either A, B, C, or D. What best describes you? I live on or within 2 blocks of the waterfront. I work on or near the waterfront. I own property on or near the waterfront. I live, work, or own property elsewhere in the city of Kingston, or I don't live, work, or own property in the city of Kingston, but I frequently visit the waterfront for recreation. Okay, great. Looks like we're getting some answers. And if you have any troubles, just make sure that you message in the Q&A, and we can try and do our best to help.
Okay, we're going to let this run for just a minute, and it's interesting to see when we see the answers stop changing, we'll move on, but it is interesting to see who we have with us here tonight. A pretty good mixture of people who own property, people who live in Kingston, people who visit the waterfront. A couple people, 19% live within 2 blocks. So that's interesting. So y'all would be one person works near the waterfront, so that's great. Okay, so
Awesome.
great. So I think we'll get back and we'll do some more questions in just a little bit. But for now, we're going to move on.
Amy, if I might jump in here just for a second, because we did have a question or two come up in the chat. We will give the instructions again before we ask the next question in just a moment. So you'll get the number again to which you need to send your text message and what message to send to register and be in the poll for the rest of the evening. Go ahead, Amy.
Great. So I'm just going to give a little bit of background about the project. And for those who were with us last night, this is a little bit of a repeat. So for about the next 10 minutes, but then we'll get into new materials. So, but for anyone new and new to the project, what is Kingston Forward? So Kingston Forward is the citywide rezoning effort. And so we are looking at writing the rules for the city of Kingston to best meet the city's goals and what you want to see for new development for the future. And so we're looking at the historic Kingston and as a model for it's an amazing place, an amazing precedents you have here, and lots of great DNA in the town that we can use to grow from into the future. And so that is at the high level view what the project's all about. Here is the timeline. So we started work last fall and did some initial site visit. We had a charrette that I'm going to talk about in a minute, which was really a series of meetings and workshops to get input. We had an initial survey last fall. All of this was gathering input and feedback that we could use to help to write the first draft of the code. So we've been working on that since then. But as we were doing that, we realized there were a few areas we really needed some more feedback on in order to create a first draft. So that was the purpose of the meetings last night and tonight to reach out to ask some questions and get some feedback that'll inform that first draft. So moving forward, we're looking at having a first draft in the spring, likely April. It's our target. And we'll be having some additional meetings at that time to review the code with you all. So I mentioned the charrette. It's a kind of funny word, but it's really just a series of meetings. We had online meetings, we had in-person meetings at City Hall. We gathered around the table, did some brainstorming exercises. We had meetings on different topics like transportation and housing and economic development, and really was just gathering feedback about what's important to people in the city of Kingston so that we can write the rules and standards for future development to meet those priorities. We also got out on the ground and did walking tours throughout the neighborhoods. I do want to mention that we had planned on doing some walking tours for the waterfront and for the Albany Avenue area this Saturday, but unfortunately with the snow coming in, we're going to postpone those and reschedule. So you can look at on the website for dates for that coming up soon in the future. During the charrette, we also had our full team there doing drawings. So as we were hearing words and ideas from people, we did our best to try to put those words and ideas into drawings. And so working interactively to get feedback from people. We created maps like this one, the synthesis map, where we tried to take all the many ideas and identify some key themes that we were hearing over and over again, and kind of identify those to spots on the map. We also, created a lot of drawings like this one. So all of that is in our charrette report. It's a quick read, about 40 pages, lots of big pictures. So if you have time and you haven't looked at it yet, you can go to engagekingston.com and go to the Kingston Forward page and download that and kind of quickly get up to speed with everything that we've been talking about so far. Probably the most important thing to come from that charrette week was these big ideas. So we tried to, again, take the themes, things that we heard over and over, and these are kind of our marching orders for drafting the code of what's important. And so it's things like making small and incremental development easy and simple to do, getting the building to street relationship right to support walkability, having affordable housing. We heard a lot about housing all through the week, and really the need for affordability in the city. And so creating more housing to support the community, and having green resiliency. We woven throughout the code, getting parking right, and then fixing some problem spots like clarifying standards that aren't clear today. So you might have heard the term form-based code before and been wondered what that meant. And so form-based code is a type of zoning code, and it's the type of zoning code that we're looking to use for Kingston. And it focuses really on the physical form of development rather than simply uses. So what kind of place do you want to be? And then you write the rules and standards to fit that type of place. The Form-Based Codes Institute, their website, formbasedcodes.org, has a lot of background information. You can find out a lot more about form-based codes if you're curious to look that up after the meeting tonight. And really the big idea is to find the places that you love, and you can write standards to emulate those places, and then think about if there are things about the physical environment that you don't love, and write rules to prohibit those. So form-based codes get very predictable about a few things that really impact the urban environment. So for example, where buildings are placed on their lots, rather than having setbacks in a great variety of locations where buildings can be placed, they're very specific about where the front wall needs to be placed, and also about where parking needs to be placed. And really the rules that create the character and the environment, these are the rules that we're focused on and trying to figure out what should be the future standards for the city. So when you have a form-based code, you'll see things like standards for different frontage types, for example, shop fronts or porches and stoops, and how buildings address the street. You'll see architectural elements and details that should be common among all buildings, so they fit together on a street. You'll find rules for the design of the street itself. That's different from standard zoning, because we're really looking at the entirety of the built environment. So not just private development, but looking at writing standards for streets and public spaces so that they complement what's happening on the private lots. And then finally, uses. We're not going to be ignoring uses. We will have some standards, but generally broader categories. So there's a little more flexibility in use, but we do want to have some important provisions to not allow certain uses that you don't want to have, for example, mixed together. The transect is another vocabulary term. And so if you come to future Kingston Forward meetings, you'll hear us talking about the transect a lot. And what that is it's a planning tool that was used to categorize the built environment. And so we use these numbers, T1, T2, T3, to describe different types of places, where T1 is the natural zone, T3 is housing and is a housing on larger lots. And then as you get increase in numbers, T5, T6, buildings get closer together, you get an even greater mix of uses, often more intensity in taller buildings. And so each of these areas will have certain rules associated with them, and those are the rules for the zoning. And so just to make that a little more vivid for you, we went and kind of grabbed some images throughout Kingston to illustrate how this transect could be applied to the city. So for example, your T5 area is on Broadway, or where you have Main Street shopfront buildings, and going through the neighborhoods where you have some neighborhoods where buildings are closer together on smaller lots, and some neighborhoods where you have deep front setbacks. And so, the rules for these areas would all be different. There would also be some special districts that don't maybe necessarily fit all of, into one of these categories. So for example, for large institutional uses, or for an area, if you wanted to have an auto-oriented area with parking in the front that doesn't match the standards of the other transects, you could create a special district for that. So we'll be using the transect, and as I mentioned, as you look at the first draft of the code, you can start to see how that's applied to Kingston. So that is my very short background on the project. Again, there's much more on the website if you're curious to learn more, but I wanted to spend most of our time tonight focused specifically on the waterfront. And so I'm going to turn it over to Victor to talk about the area we're focused on tonight.
Context matters. And as in the way that Amy was just describing, with code writing, one size doesn't fit all. Each place is different. So we have to take that into account in making rules. And so with these special focus areas, like last night's discussion of Albany and Early Avenues, and tonight's discussion about the waterfront, we're zooming in on particularly unique places. And so this one, of course, is going from the roughly paralleling East Strand Street. So starting at 9 West and working our way east to the Pankaki waterfront along Rondout Creek. And the next one. Okay, so now taking the overlay off of the aerial photograph, that you can see now a little more clearly where there are vacant parcels, where there are existing buildings, parking lots, and so on. The one interesting thing about the waterfront is that its uses have been changing pretty continually over the hundreds of years. So it's reasonable to expect that new uses and new possibilities will exist in the coming decades for this area. So what we're doing now is taking a pause to ask for additional focused feedback from the community on this particular portion of the Rondout Creek waterfront. Now, there are also challenges here that are unique to this part of the city. Not surprising, on the waterfront, there are concerns with flooding and storm events and sea level rise. So this map actually overlays the Federal Emergency Management Agency's 100-year and 500-year floodplains. So I just want to show you that we've looked into this and we're taking into account as we work and keeping in mind the sensitive natural features of the area. With regard to sea level rise, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration currently projects up to 3 feet of sea level rise for this area by 2100. So what that means for the waterfront and East Strand is kind of depicted by this map. Unless some adaptive measures are taken, it's like raising the road or lifting surrounding areas or reconsidering the armoring of the seawall, a significant portion of the waterfront and East Strand will see steadily increasing flooding and then eventually be inundated by the end of the century. Now, rewind and look back. This portion of the waterfront hasn't always been as quiet as it is today. Do we have the Sanborn map, or I think it was the previous slide? There you go. In this map, it's really interesting. The pink boxes, the yellow boxes, and the blue boxes are the building footprints from this ancient fire insurance map from back when this area was a thriving Hudson River Valley trade center. And there was a lot of activity centered to the western side of this map around the Rondout. And then there were heavier industrial uses spreading eastward along the waterfront and items that took more space as you got closer to Pankaki. I think that you should, in particular, look at the cluster of pink buildings in that historic map. The fire insurance map shows that this area was thick with development. It had buildings touching one another, close to one another, in a kind of continuous street scene. So let's look at the ground level photograph here. Now this was taken from a newspaper article around the time that the waterfront demolition was being planned. And I think it's worth comparing it to the 1875 lithograph, which is on the previous slide. I think whoever's advancing the slides, you're getting 2 slides at a time. So just you back this up to the 1875 lithograph. Yep, I'll see it there. Okay, so there you go. There it is. Even along this section of the waterfront, east of Broadway, there was a bustling commercial center supporting the local economy and the Pankaki neighborhood. You see brick warehouses, lumber yards, 3-story tall Main Street buildings along Strand, and then the layer of buildings that were between Strand and the water's edge itself in this litho. Now let's go to the newspaper article. There you go. This was a Main Street kind of format, and you can see that by the time this article from 1966 was published, this area with all its rich Main Street legacy was right in the crosshairs of urban renewal in the 1960s. And whole swaths of this kind of fine-grained, walkable urbanism were demolished. Many of you know that story. I'll point out that in this picture, you can see 1- and 2-story buildings, mostly 3-story buildings, and even toward the back of the picture, 4 stories as in the traditional waterfront brick utilitarian buildings of their day. Some of you know about the Lost Rondout project, which shows us just how extensive and this was to the community, how much impact it had on Kingston. Urban renewal erased whole districts and neighborhoods. We've been getting familiar with this story. I think understanding this story is critical to formulating a kind of community-led vision of what should come next. In the newspaper article, there was reference to a hardware store. If you look up the address that they mentioned in the newspaper article and you look for it on today's Google Maps, it will bring you to this spot where the grass is seen on the left side, a result of all that demolition and urban renewal. Eric?
Thanks, Victor. Hi, everyone. My name is Eric Pate. I'm an urban designer and town planner with Dover Coal. And want to kind of lead off with a quick tour of East Strand and make sure we all have it fresh in our minds. So here we see what East Strand looks like today. It's not, it's current conditions. We can see the gaps and missing teeth in the urban fabric of the area. New development has slowly been filling in what was demolished during urban renewal. Next slide, Amy. But there are still several historic waterfront buildings that remain and that give us a sense of what was here before. The Cornell building is a remarkable example of Hudson River Valley architecture and can help set a precedent for future development. Next slide. So when we get onto Ponkhockey, we can see additional historic examples of what East Strand looked like in the past. The trolley line is an important part of the waterfront experience that you see there on the right side of your screen. Next slide. The existing zoning of the area is limited to R2, which is for two-family residential in most of the Ponkhockey neighborhood, with M1 for the area that includes the Trolley Museum and the city's water treatment facility. The waterfront itself is within the Rondout district. Next slide, please. So it's important to understand, learn from, and build off of previous planning efforts for the area. Some of the most important planning work done to date is that surrounding the long-term resiliency of the area. The Kingston Tidal Waterfront Flooding Task Force plan from 2013 included a number of zoning recommendations to consider for future zoning code updates like this. This plan understood that since the waterfront is privately owned and that the property owners intended to develop their property, that it was important to create a framework that would ensure future development was done in a resilient way that adapted to rising waters and would not be an issue for public resources into the future. Next slide, please. In 2015, the Brownfields Opportunity Area Plan identified potential development patterns that we could see along the waterfront, both near the Rondout and along East Strand and to Ponkhockey. This approach was fairly unique. And actually, Amy, could you go to the next slide too? This next slide really shows it pretty well. It really balanced the kind of environmental needs of the area, the sensitive natural features of the area, while also accommodating new private development that was done in a responsible way. Next slide. So the current property owners have put together a conceptual rendering here showing how they could see development play out in the future. Their proposal includes the waterfront promenade required by the existing code. This also shows a new seawall along the length of the waterfront. Next slide. Another important element of the recent proposal is the inclusion of regular public access at the end of each neighborhood street, as we can see here. Next slide. So Throughout New England and along the East Coast, there, obviously a strong maritime history with numerous examples of waterfront architecture and building types that support water-dependent uses. There's plenty of examples to draw inspiration from when designing new waterfront development. So now the question is this what the community wants to emulate? Is this what the community wants to see more of? Or are historic architectural styles not as important for future development? Is there an opportunity to embrace more forward-looking architecture, not necessarily grounded in regional historic precedent? Next slide. Another important part of a resilient code update is whether development patterns are oriented towards people or to cars. While there are many places that may be more suitable to auto-oriented development, the question here is should the waterfront be one of those places? Or is the waterfront special? Should new zoning rules look at how buildings interact with pedestrians more? Next slide. So how could zoning rules improve walkability? There are a number of ways, and you can see a few of them here. Building transparency, that means like windows and doors and kind of holes in the facade of a building. Transparency, building design and shopfront design standards, and requirements for liner buildings for parking garages, for example. These are a number of ways that we can regulate kind of pedestrian-oriented design within a zoning code update. Next slide. So let's take a look at what these decisions could look like in the future. Next slide. Zooming into the segment of the waterfront and East Strand near Ponkaki, we see a number of privately owned properties where development is possible in the future. Any potential future development would still have to meet FEMA standards and would be dependent on limiting impacts within flood-prone areas. So with that in mind, next slide, please, Amy. The first scenario that we're showing here shows how development could occur in a way that meets existing zoning standards. This shows a more conventional auto-oriented development pattern with plentiful parking and standard building types. Next slide. In this scenario, a raised strand, East Strand, and a new seawall lift new development above their current height. And a waterfront promenade is shown linking new development along the waterfront. And district parking shown as a parking garage in this example with liner buildings along East Strand. Next slide, please. So now, after that, let's take a look at how a more pedestrian-oriented scenario could play out. This layout combines the ecologically minded shoreline treatment of the brownfield opportunity area plan, along with new private infill organized in a pedestrian and street-oriented way. East Strand is shown here as raised and slightly realigned to create a waterfront boulevard of sorts with the trolley running down the middle. Next slide, please. So we can see here the waterfront promenade, how it kind of snakes its way through there. We see how a floodable park could be incorporated into the waterfront design there, how living shorelines could be included. Also how historic building styles could be incorporated along with water dependent uses there. Next slide, please. So now what does this look like at the street level on East Strand? Next slide. The existing zoning code, as we saw in that first example, would allow for buildings set back from the street at this location with parking lots up front. Waterfront buildings can be seen to the right facing Rondout Creek. Next slide, please. Prime real estate on the waterfront could actually accommodate surface parking lots. Next slide. So, in looking at the pedestrian scenario that we can see here from East Strand, it just shows how it could be dramatically different if a few rules are adjusted. So this is a different East Strand, one with buildings facing the street and on-street parking on either side. Waterfront buildings face both Rondout Creek and the street in this example. We can see historic building styles add to the sense of place of the waterfront area. And in this example, permeable paving supports a green tree canopy. There are also options for incentivizing new development to offer community benefits, such as affordable housing. Next slide. So in this example, we see how just adding, allowing development to be increased by an extra story there. If this development does incorporate affordable housing, we can see how that is just kind of, it's just one step forward to essentially ensuring that we create places for all Kingstonians. So with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Amy. Thank you.
Great. So hopefully we've had some food for thought. In just a minute, we're going to ask you some questions, what you thought about some of those ideas. But there's also a survey on the Engage Kingston site right now. So if you haven't already looked at it, please take a few minutes and fill it out. Some of the questions will be similar to what we're asking tonight, but there's some additional questions there as well. And I thought I'd give you all a preview of some of what we've been hearing so far. So here's an example of one of the questions asking people about which potential outcomes you think are important for the future of the waterfront. So through the beginning of this week, some of the answers we've been getting, public access is, kind of risen to the top of that. Walkability and bikeability. So thinking about the design of streets and making it safe for pedestrians and cyclists. Focusing on resiliency as a part of any plan, important. Also, having water views from surrounding streets and neighborhoods and having those maintained into the future. Having new buildings have shops and services and other community destinations and affordable housing. So all these things are important, we know, but it is kind of interesting to us to see, from this list, you could pick, I think, 3, which are most important to you. Also, we asked some initial thoughts on building height. So we asked what the tallest a new building should be able to be. So split about half and half, up to 2.5 stories, which is what the existing zoning in the Rondout Creek district along the waterfront is today. Also up to 4 stories, 46%. So that matches some of those historic precedents that Victor was showing. And then we asked, should new buildings match the architectural features or appearance of nearby historic or other historic buildings in materials or proportions? 67% yes, and 21% not sure. So that's something we need to provide a little more information around. Also, we asked if people feel safe walking or biking today. Generally, yes. We have 54% yes, 26% neutral, 20% no. We also asked, what sorts of things about the streets might need improving. So sidewalks have risen to the top of the list there, having a connected system of sidewalks to walk along, but also bike facility and lighting and slower vehicle speeds are all mentioned. So again, this survey is still at engagekingston.com. So please take a minute and go and fill it out if you haven't yet. But in the meantime, we have a good focus group of about 35 people here tonight. So curious to hear your thoughts on some of what Eric has and Victor have been sharing. So once again, to pull out your phones, and if you already did this, you don't need to do it again, but for anyone who hasn't yet, I'll walk through it one more time. You want to send a text message to the number 22333, and you're going to send the number Dover Cole 516. So when you do that, you should get a message like this. If you're not getting this, you can please let us know in the chat or the Q&A, and we can help to troubleshoot. But that's all you need to do. You should do that once, and then you can answer questions. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and Elise is going to walk through. We have a series of questions. Curious to get your thoughts on tonight.
Awesome. Okay, so like Amy said, you'll just go ahead and text your answers in. So for this question, you can actually select 3 answers. The best is to send 3 separate text message with the letter that you want to choose. So A, select your 3 priorities for potential future development in the waterfront area. A, affordable housing is provided. B, active waterfront with shops, restaurants, and other neighborhood services. C, public access via a waterfront walkway. D, water views from surrounding streets, neighborhoods. E, new park green spaces. F, public parking supply is increased through a parking garage. G, public parking supply is increased through new on-street parking. H, walkability, bikeability is improved. I, focus on resiliency and protection from sea level rise. J, high quality pedestrian oriented building design, or K, other. So you can send up to 3 answers. Just send them as separate text messages. Awesome. So it looks like we're getting lots of answers. I'm going to give it a couple more minutes.
And if anyone is not logged in, I want to call your attention to the top of the screen. So if you need that number again, it's you text the message Dover Cole 516 to the number 22333. That'll stay at the top of the screen. If for some reason you get logged out, you need to get logged back in again. That's how you can get in. But it is interesting to see these changing in real time as people are answering. So you'll be able to answer up to 3, and then it'll tell you that you've answered enough.
Awesome. Okay, so it
Amy
looks
and
like
Elise, give this one a minute. And there's still new answers coming in, and there are a lot of things to choose from.
Mhm.
I think the lesson in a list like this is that, of course, they're all important, and so this isn't to suggest that any of these are unimportant. In fact, all of these have been identified as important. What we're looking for is which ones for you rise to the very top of the list. Like if you had to pick only 3, your top 3, the most important ones, what would they be? It doesn't mean you're in any way suggesting that the other items are unimportant. But nobody changed their vote as a result of what I just said, so I think everybody gets it. Okay. And I also saw that Tanya was having a little technical trouble. If anyone is having trouble seeing the screen that's being shared from Elise's computer, I can confirm it's coming through. Try exiting your full screen. There's a button up in the upper right-hand corner that says View. You can exit full screen and come back, or swap screens, and probably your image will pop in at that point.
awesome. So it looks like the answers have slowly stopped. So I'm going to go to the next question. Okay, so this is about building orientation. You can either text A, B, or C for this question. A, new buildings should be required to face both East Strand Street and Rondout Creek. Or B, new buildings may face either East Strand Street or Rondout Creek. Or C, not sure yet.
I think the big differentiation here is the answer B, that buildings may face either or, but there won't be required to have a frontage. So you could have the back of a building facing East Strand Street or Rondout Creek as well. So just kind of thinking about what the rules are, and it's for this specific spot on the waterfront. I think our numbers are slowing down.
Yeah, okay, so I think I'm going to go ahead to the next question. Okay, so this is about urban form. A, new buildings should be required to be placed close to the sidewalk on the north side of East Strand Street with parking to the rear to encourage walkability. Or B, new buildings may be permitted to be set back on the north side of East Strand Street with parking in the front. So this is just looking at the options of kind of having a more walkable area, or focusing on buildings being pushed back a little bit and having more parking.
So as before, Elise, give us a little time. We've had a comment come in over the chat that says we're going too fast.
Okay.
So it's good feedback. We'll just to give people time to read, especially with these that have a lot to read. I think it's great to give people plenty of time to make sure they know what they're responding to. It's also important for everyone participating to recognize we look at these polls as a way of improving the conversation, getting more information from you quickly to get a sense of the room. We don't look at these as if they're some scientifically, statistically valid sample of the Kingston electorate. We know that they're not. They are the answers from a self-selected group of volunteers who are giving up their time on a Thursday night to and responded to the advertising to participate tonight. So we realize that there might be someone else who didn't make it tonight who has a completely opposite answer of what you said. But this does give us a way to know where more information is needed, and what the people who are participating say. It is, in a way, Bartek, a scientifically, statistically valid sample of one thing, and that is the kinds of people who will give up time on a Thursday night and therefore are likely to attend future public hearings about the adoption of the code, or tell their friends that things are happening and fill them in on what's going on. So thank you all for participating.
And there was an interesting message in the chat as well. I want to also let everyone know, if you answered a question, but then you think about it more and you decide you want to change your answer, you can do that. So you try. So if you typed A and you really want B, you type in clear, it'll clear out your answer, and you type B. If you forget what I just told you, just try typing B and it'll text you and say, type clear first. So you type clear and you can change your answer. So so that's available if you decide to change your mind while we have the questions open.
Okay, and I'm going to go ahead to the next one because it looks like the answers have stopped coming in. Okay, and this one is about building height. So A, new buildings may be up to 2.5 stories, matching the existing zoning for Rondout Creek District. B, new buildings may be up to 4 stories, matching the historic precedent that we saw in the Rondout area. We saw some of those photos earlier in the presentation. Or C, new buildings may be up to 4 stories if community benefits are provided, such as affordable housing or public open space. D, new buildings may be greater than 4 stories if community benefits are provided. Oh, it looks like we have double of those. So we will be adding those together.
It's slightly different. So answer C is that buildings can be up to 4 stories. So the difference with the answer B is that buildings can be up to 4 stories just by themselves. Answer C is buildings could be up to 4 stories, but if there's for example, bonus height, like Eric was showing in his drawing. So if you do something like provide affordable housing or provide open space on your lot, you can go up to 4 stories. And then answer D is that it can be even greater than 4 stories if you do those things. And then E is not sure yet. So that's so we'll give this one just a few more minutes. I see some folks are maybe changing their answers or thinking about it more. So let's just give a few minutes. We'll see how that turns out. And so the community benefits, for example, this is something that as we're drafting the code, we'll be thinking about how that works. And if that's something that the community wants to consider, that we can have included in the first draft and review that together, in the spring, exactly how that would work and what that means. And we can decide, if that is the right track. So tonight, again, is about, trying to decide, is this something that there's interest in that we should pursue in the first draft?
Okay, and it looks like the answers have slowed, so I'm going to go ahead to the next question. So the questions are now, we're going to be referencing these 2 images. So on the left, you have the auto-oriented scenario, and then on the right, you have the pedestrian-oriented scenario. So for the next question, it's going to be referencing these 2 images and your preferences on them. Okay, what did you think of the initial scenarios illustrated tonight? Option A is the option for pedestrian-oriented development is consistent with my vision. Or B, The option for pedestrian-oriented development is generally consistent with my vision with some changes. C, the option for auto-oriented development is consistent with my vision. D, the option for auto-oriented development is generally consistent with my vision with some changes. E, neither option is consistent with my vision, or F, not sure yet.
And I want to mention, we'll have an open-ended question next. And so if I see there's a lot of people answering B. And so if there are things that should change, that's something you can tell us there. You can also, please feel free that in the chat and Q&A, if you have some, reactions to that, things that I really loved that option, but I thought this one thing should change, or I'm really not sure about, the way the buildings related to the street, or how tall they were, or how the street was designed, whatever it was that you thought should be changed, please, we're curious to know what those changes are. So. Someone changed their mind on answer E. No way. Leave it open for just a few more minutes. And
And again, if you need to change your answer, you just have to text clear and then the correct letter that you wanted to choose.
Elise, is it possible for you to briefly go back to the two designs?
Yeah. So on the left, again, is the auto-oriented scenario, with buildings facing either Strand or the Rondout Creek. And then the pedestrian-oriented scenario has buildings facing both and kind of denser development. Okay. And I'm going to switch back to the question really quick. And we'll give it another couple minutes in case anyone wants to change their answer after seeing the images. Okay, and it kind of looks like everybody has decided. So we're going to go to the last question. And like Amy said, this is an open-ended question. So you can type in, a phrase, things that you want us to think about, maybe some of your reactions to the images. If something was missing, let us know what it was.
Also, if there's anything that you came here tonight, wanting to tell us about, or, that wasn't mentioned or covered tonight, we're curious to know what you're thinking about. So we'll give this a few minutes. It takes a few minutes for to type in and text those answers. But again, there you go.
You can type very short answers, just one or two syllables or one or two words, or a longer sentence. And as your messages come in, they'll be displayed on the screen for everyone. Amy, while these are coming in, could you just describe briefly one more time where to look on Engage Kingston for the online survey? What I think is nice about that is that you can take as long as you want. And we were kind of going quickly tonight to give everybody a crisp and efficient meeting, but we realized that this is a lot of material and it's a lot to think about. So you can go to engagekingston.com and take your time and give us all your thoughts. Amy, do you want to explain how to find it?
Absolutely. So it's at engagekingston.com, and on there, there'll be a list of all the city's projects, and you click the button for Kingston Forward, or you can type it in directly. It's a little longer, engagekingston.com/Kingston-forward. So you can go there, And as I mentioned on the site, we have all the recordings from our past meetings. So if you are curious to see things that we've done before, or kind of get up to speed on the project, see the Charette report, that information is all there. But the newest information up at the top are these 2 surveys that are out now for Albany and Hurley Avenue and the Waterfront. So we're asked similar questions to what we asked tonight. We're curious, the people tonight, to get your live reaction, but then also some additional questions in that survey. There's also an open-ended question at the end of that survey like this. So if, any of the questions don't fit what you were wanting to tell us about, we are curious to hear what you're thinking. So please take some time and fill that out and get that back to us. We're going to leave it up for another couple of weeks and gather some feedback. So again, please take some time to go and fill that out. And this is great. We're reading all this. We're recording all these answers as well. It's interesting to see, once the ball gets rolling and all the answers start going in. Oh, I don't know. Is it possible to scroll down at least? Some of them are popping in at the bottom.
Let me.
There we go.
Oops. Sorry about that. There we go.
So I do want to mention, we did the survey before we did the meeting tonight. And so the drawings that you saw tonight are not in the survey, but we created those to kind of help to give some food for thought to the conversation, talking about setbacks and heights and things. And so curious for anyone who's watched this, or if you want to tell your neighbors about this and they come back and look over these drawings in the next few days, you can go then and fill in the survey kind of with that additional information and those additional drawings. So we'll leave this running for a few more minutes. Just some, I'll cover next steps and final announcements after this. But one thing I do want to highlight one more time while we've got everyone on is the walking tours. So we were anticipating doing walking tours this weekend, but unfortunately with the snow coming in, worried about snow cover and getting around. So we're going to look for some new dates. We will be doing them, but just at a future date. So you also watch the Engage Kingston site. And we'll be posting them there and, posting notices as soon as we have new dates for that, but we'll be, anxious to get out on the ground and walk around together. It's always a great way to learn, what's important and, kind of look at the existing conditions and imagine what the possibilities are for the future. So, so if you're able to join us when we reschedule, that'd be another great way to talk with us.
It's actually great to read. Thank you very much, everybody who's been typing in answers. By attending tonight's meeting and participating in this way, this was not one of those really long meetings that lasts all day on a Saturday or what have you. You've helped immeasurably, and everyone here that's attending tonight is officially deputized as members of the planning team. And so that means helping us get the word out for future events as we move toward draft in the spring for the first draft for everyone to review and consider, and as we move into the revisions process. So thank you. I just want to say on my behalf as the leader of the consultant team, I really appreciate everybody's help tonight. Amy, project director for this effort, whenever you're ready, walk them through next steps.
And I can leave this running so you can still submit answers while Amy is presenting these last few slides.
Okay, great. So as I was mentioning, the survey one last time, here's that web address written out if anyone wants to write it down. So again, engagekingston.com and then /Kingston forward will get you directly to the page. Up at the top of the page, you'll find links to the surveys. There's one specifically for the waterfront. There's also one for Albany and Hurley Avenue. So if you hadn't filled that one out, you can let us know your thoughts. We did have a meeting I want to mention yesterday for Albany and Hurley Avenue. Similar to this, we showed some food for thought ideas and had some questions. So we have a recording from that. As soon as we get this recording, we'll be posting both of them up to the site. So probably sometime tomorrow, the videos will be there. So if you didn't watch it, you can go back and watch that video for Albany and Hurley Avenue as well. And then finally, just next steps. So, we're continuing to gather feedback. At any time you have a question, you can go to the Engage Kingston site and message us and let us know what you're thinking. I wanted to mention also the DGEIS, that is a lot of letters, but this is the environmental study that is going along, state mandated environmental study that accompanies the rezoning process. So that'll be getting started next month. So what they're doing is they're doing initial scoping, looking at the types of things that zoning can impact. And then as we have a draft of the code, they'll be comparing the existing zoning and the proposed zoning and looking at any type of environmental impact, anything from wetlands to species to historic properties, everything about the built environment. So if you're curious to learn more about that, there'll be a scoping session coming up soon, and we'll have notices for that on the website as well. We'll have the first draft of the code. Again, we're targeting April, so we'll have some additional meetings then. I'll be coming back and sharing with you, again, the first draft, and be anxious to get feedback and comments on it. And then we'll take the next few months after that to gather feedback and make revisions, and anticipating by summer to have an updated draft. So that is the overall timeline. So with that, I'll turn it over to Bartek for any last words. And again, just want to thank everyone for their taking time to meet with us tonight.
Thank you everyone for joining. And I will repeat what Amy just said. If you would like to receive a direct notification each time we schedule another event for Kingston Forward, you can do that by registering on Engage Kingston. So thank you very much for joining, and have a good night.